Hi, everyone. Today is the Safety Harbor Public Library workshop that will be focusing on the writing and language section of the SAT. I'm going to give it a few minutes before we dive in and go ahead and share the email that I sent out yesterday. Let me go ahead and grab that here and I'll put it in the chat box. So just in case you did not receive that email, you can still access the materials that we'll be referencing today. Give me 1 second here as I pull that up. So just a couple of housekeeping things. You can see me today. I cannot see you. So if you do have a question, please put that in the chat box, or you can use the anonymous Q&A feature too. Let me go ahead and grab those materials right here. Here we go. And while we are waiting to get started, as more people join, if you could put in the chat box just your grade and when you are planning to take the SAT, that will help me get to know you a little bit better today. So your grade, when you're planning on taking the SAT, and you can even add your school too, if you feel like sharing that. And here we go. Here's the link. And I'm going to be sharing in that chat box the materials. So let me pull up that chat box and you should see that pop up. There we go. So if you click on that link, you'll see the email that I sent out yesterday. And in that email, I'm going to pull up the email here so everyone can see it too. You'll see a couple different things, and I'm just going to give you a quick little tour before we dive in. So we have the core concepts and critical thinking skills handout with the raise of hands. Oh, it says the chat is disabled. It's enabled from my end. I don't know why. Let's see if there's something I need to press to enable it. Oh, thank you for telling me. Now the chat should be enabled. Thank you so much for letting me know. So you should be able to send that chat with your grade and when you're planning on taking the SAT and the name of your school, if you wish to share that. So here you can see a couple different things. By a raise of hands, how many of you have taken one of my workshops in the past? I'm just going to look for a raise of hands here. So I only see 2 hands. So I am going to pretend that none of you know anything about what I offer. Okay, so the core concepts and critical thinking skills handout is my go-to handout for SAT prep. It's not a super big document, but it has a lot of critical information that you need to know for the SAT. The most in-depth part of this handout is the math strategy, and tomorrow is the math strategy workshop. So we'll be taking a look at that. But here you can see writing and language strategy. It's just a half a page. And this is the stuff that you absolutely need to know when you go and take the SAT. So this would be my starting point for prep. In the email that I sent, there's also the writing and language core concepts. The writing and language core concepts is an expanded version of what you see in the core concepts handout. So there's a little bit more detail and information in here to help you remember the rules that you need for the writing and language section. And then let's see what else we have. We have the grammar handout. So I created the core concepts handouts. I did not create the grammar handout. There was a lady that created this many years ago, and I have used this for, I think, over a decade now, or close to a decade, if not over a decade. And it has helped so many students achieve perfect scores in the writing and language section. And the amazing thing about this handout is even if a student starts off with the writing and language section missing half or more than half of the questions, if the student really puts in the time, studies this handout, and takes practice tests, so real practice tests from the College Board are what I always recommend starting with, and practices these rules and references them, I've seen scores go way up in the writing and language section. So in my opinion, the writing and language section is the easiest section of the SAT to gain extra points or improve your score. So if you are, let's say by raise of hands, how many of you are trying to get, I'm going to lower everyone's hands, but how many of you are interested in getting Bright Futures? By raise of hands. So quite a few of you. So if you're trying to get Bright Futures, the first section I'd really focus on perfecting is the writing and language section. So make sure that you're getting all of the points that you can get there, because they're going to be the easiest points to get on the SAT. And I'm going to just look at your responses here. So we're have students from quite a few grades. That's awesome. But this handout, I'm not going to go through in detail today. So my goal for today is to look at real SAT questions and see how do we apply these concepts that you have available to you to study to actual questions. So how do we approach these questions and succeed on the SAT? And I realized I never introduced myself at the beginning of today's workshop. I just dove on in, but now since everyone I think has joined, let's go ahead and just start ahead with that. So my name is Carla Berry. I have been offering SAT and ACT prep for over a decade. And I also help students with their college applications, writing their personal statements, and so forth. So this is truly my passion. I have witnessed so many students achieve their goals by putting in the effort. And what I love about the SAT and the ACT, about standardized testing in general, is it really rewards hard work. So a lot of times we make the assumption that, hey, it's a standardized test. If you don't do so well on it, you're just stuck with that score. And I have witnessed that it's not true. It does take some students longer than others. So if you are, we have some juniors here. That's great. Some ninth graders, some sixth graders, I think maybe I saw in here. So the earlier you start, the more time you have to perfect your score. But I've even seen 12th graders. So that's pretty late in the game for the SAT, but I have witnessed 12th graders get where they need to be. The nice thing about Bright Futures is that you have until the summer after you graduate to get the score that you need, the SAT score that you need for Bright Futures. So if you're a senior, that should alleviate some stress. And I have seen plenty of students do that. So they've already graduated, they've already been accepted to college, and they take that SAT one final time in June, and that's what gets them Bright Futures. Of course, the ideal is if you don't wait until June SAT after you graduated, but you still have that option available to you. Okay, let's go ahead and go back in here. So day, we're gonna look at practice test 1. And I think this is scoring practice test 10, or scoring practice test 1, sorry. I added a 0 in that email by accident. But if you click on the link, it's the correct practice test. I didn't catch that mistake. Okay, let's go ahead and pull up practice test 1. Give me 1 second as I do that. And then we'll go ahead and get started. I did not catch that I didn't change that there, but that's okay. And if you guys can tell me in the chat before I talk about this too, how many of you have actually done any SAT prep so far? Have you taken practice tests yet? Have you worked with a tutor or taken a class, or worked on Khan Academy, or attended workshops, or maybe one of your teachers at school incorporates SAT prep into class? Let me know that too, so that I know just how much you know so far when I talk about this stuff. For the most part, I'll pretend that you don't know anything to make it easiest, but I do like knowing what you know so far. Okay, I'm going to just pull up the writing and language section and share my screen. So when I'm sharing my screen, you guys can see my screen. I cannot see what I'm sharing. So if at any point I am talking about a question and it looks like I'm writing and you do not see what I'm sharing, please tell me in the chat box so that I can reshare my screen. And I see here, as far as your prep, that most of you have taken, or some of you have taken the PSAT and done some prep, and Khan Academy I see there too. I'm just skimming your response. Okay. And I'm going to share my screen here. So when you are taking practice SATs, whether you do it on your own or through Khan Academy, I highly recommend actually printing off the tests and taking them on paper, if at all possible. So for now, this is going to change in a few years, but for now, the SAT is a paper test. So you take it on paper, and it's really advantageous to write on your test and take notes. And as you think of something, to put it down on paper. There's something called working memory, and really great test takers have really great working memories. It's the amount of information you can store in your mind at a given time. And you can fake having a really great working memory just by annotating really well, underlining, and taking notes as you go. So we're going to do that today too, as we go through these questions. So for the writing and language section, you have 35 minutes and 44 questions. When you first start working, where did this go? Through these tests, do not worry about the time. So the time is something you're going to worry about after you're able to answer most of those questions correctly. If you try to focus on answering questions within the time allotted and answering them correctly, usually it's going to be much harder to improve your score. But if you first focus on really understanding the questions, applying the rules, and getting them correct, and then once you get them correct, then focusing on time, you're going to have a much easier time preparing for the SAT. As you get better at answering questions, your time will naturally improve because you won't have as much doubt when you are answering questions. So at first, it might seem pretty impossible, 35 minutes, 44 questions, but it is totally possible. And you may find once you start really perfecting the section that you even have 5 or more minutes left over after you've answered the 44 questions to go back and check your work. So that's great when that happens, that you have some extra time to actually check. So in the writing and language section, you're going to see 2 types of questions, and we're going to be differentiating between the two as we go through the questions today. We're going to be seeing grammar questions and meaning questions. And we'll look at what each one is. So grammar questions are going to be questions that relate to subject-verb agreement, punctuation, are you using the correct pronoun, and so forth. So they are the most straightforward questions. There's a rule that is going to be in that grammar handout that will explain which answer to pick. So they're super straightforward, and we're just going to answer them as they come along. Meaning questions are a lot trickier. So meaning questions ask you to delete a part, add a part, move a part, or change a part. They actually deal with the meaning of the passage. So one of the biggest mistakes I see students make when they first take the writing and language section is they just skip from one underlined part to the next underlined part, and they don't read the part in between. So let's say for this passage, they see the first 2 paragraphs barely have any underlining, so they skip over it and they just go to outdo, and then they try to pick the answer there without reading anything. And if you do that, you're not going to be able to answer those meaning questions correctly, because a lot of the time, the meaning questions relate to the main idea. So you have to at least skim. I'm just going to say skim / read everything. And we're going to remember to save these for last. What I mean when I say save for last is you're first going to answer all the other questions relating to the passage before you answer meaning questions. So let's say number 5 here. To make this paragraph most logical, sentence 5 should be placed where? So sentence 5 would be a moving, right? So we're changing the passage. So this would be a meaning question. So we would first answer all the other questions related to the passage and then come back to question number 5. Look at question number 6 here. The writer is considering deleting the underlined sentence. So this would also be a meaning question, and you'd save it for last. By a raise of hands, and I always have students vote on this during a workshop, would you first like to attempt the first passage and then we go over it together? Or would you prefer if we just attempt the passage together right away? So if you would first like to attempt the passage on your own, and I'll give you 5 minutes to attempt it, raise your hand. So we have 10, 11. Okay, lower your hands. I'm going to make sure everyone attending is actually voting. If you would like to just do the passage together right away, raise your hand. That was pretty close, but we're outnumbered. So the first one we'll do together. Let's do that. And then the next one I'll have you do on your own. And hopefully we have enough time to get through 2 passages today. It's ambitious, but we can do it. Always takes significantly longer when we're actually working through these passages together. So way to go. We do want to look at the title when we read. The title, this time the title doesn't give us much, but sometimes the title will reference the main idea. So let's say you get to one of those main idea questions and you have absolutely no idea how to answer it. You can always go to the title, that first paragraph, and get an idea of what the passage is about. So Greek yogurt, a strained form of cultured yogurt, has grown enormously in popularity in the United States since it was first introduced in the country in the late 1980s. From 2011 to 2012 alone, sales of Greek yogurt in the US increased by 50%. The resulting increase in Greek yogurt production has forced those involved in the business to address the detrimental effects that the yogurt making process may be having on the environment. Fortunately, farmers and others in the Greek yogurt business have found many methods of controlling and eliminating most environmental threats. Given these solutions, as well as the many health benefits of the food, the advantages of Greek yogurt outdo the potential drawbacks of its production. So these questions are some of the trickiest, for sure, where you just have to decide which one's the correct word. I don't think they really fit into grammar, so I would say this is a meaning question. But since this relates just to that sentence there, we could answer it right away. So outdo does not sound right. So here's a very confusing rule for you on the SAT that we're going to start off with. I promise most of the other things we're going to look at will be less confusing. How many of you are native English speakers, or you learned how to speak English at a pretty young age? So just raise your hand if you've known how to speak English for most of your life. So if you've known how to speak English for most of your life, if something sounds weird when you're taking the SAT, it's probably going to be wrong. However, if something sounds right, it could still be wrong. So if you're reading something and you're thinking, that really does not sound right to me. So when I read this, I think, oh, something, the advantages outdo the potential drawbacks. I don't think I've ever heard someone say that. So it sounds wrong. It kind of rubs me the wrong way. So it's probably going to be wrong. But there may be a grammatical question where we in everyday language use the wrong who or whom. So it sounds okay when we read it, but we have to reference the grammar rule to decide, is it actually grammatically correct? So just because something sounds okay, I don't want you to automatically say no change. I want you to still evaluate it. But if it sounds wrong, then there's probably something we need to fix. So the first thing we're going to look at is, what are we changing? So we're changing that to outdo to something else. I already know this does not sound right. It's not going to be no change. Do the advantages defeat the potential drawbacks, outperform the potential drawbacks, or outweigh the potential drawbacks. The one that in common use in the English language would be the best pick here would be outweigh. And this is something where you're either going to know it or you're not. Many years ago, when I took the SAT, there were vocab words, for instance, in the reading section, and they were pretty predictable. And I had flashcards that I could just memorize and know those words going into the SAT, and they took that away for the most part. So it's not really going to be to your advantage to go and print out or buy huge decks of flashcards for vocab for the SAT. It's a hit or a miss. This is going to be something you either know or you don't, but it's just outweigh. Okay, let's look at the second question here. So the main environmental problem caused by the production of Greek yogurt is the creation of acid whey as a byproduct. Because it requires up to 4 times more milk to make than conventional yogurt does, Greek yogurt produces larger amounts of acid whey, which is difficult to dispose of. To address the problem of disposal, farmers have found a number of uses for acid whey. They can add it to livestock feed as a protein supplement, and people can make their own Greek-style yogurt at home by straining regular yogurt. Which choice provides the most relevant detail? So let's go to before. What are we providing evidence of for here? We are addressing the problem of disposal, right? So farmers have found a number of uses. So they can add it to livestock feed as a protein supplement. And then it says people can make their own Greek-style yogurt at home. That's not really something that farmers are doing, right? So let's see, we need uses. It's difficult to dispose of. To address the problem of disposal, they can do what? So they can add it to livestock feed. So we know it's not going to be people can make Greek-style yogurt at home. It's something farmers are doing. That's who the they is. The they is the farmers. So it's not no change. Converted into gas to use as fuel in electricity production. Possibly a farmer could do that. While sweet whey is more desirable as a food additive for humans, that is not something a farmer is doing. It's not a use of that whey, so it's not C. D, which provides an important element of their diet. So D, this which provides an important element of their diet, describes that first use. It's not offering a second use, so it's not going to be D. It has to be B here for number 2. And this is a meaning question. You could skip over this. However, because it's clear that it is in this paragraph where you're going to find the answer, it's a relevant detail, right? It's okay if you answer this question as you go along. Look how we answered this. We looked at the context. So we read a little bit before, we looked at what comes after in order to know what is going to be the most relevant detail. Okay, let's go on here. If it is improperly introduced into the environment, acid whey runoff can pollute waterways, depleting the oxygen content of streams and rivers as it decomposes. So acid whey runoff can pollute waterways. And then when we look at the answers, we can see they're all kind of the same wording. So this is going to be a grammar question. So let's see, can pollute waterways, could have polluted waterways, has polluted waterways. So we're thinking about our tense here. Let's see here, can pollute, if it is improperly introduced, it can pollute. And let's look what came before. They can add it to livestock, what comes after. They're also working together to develop additional solutions. We're just in the present tense here, we're saying something that can happen. So the can is okay. And we can see that answer choice B also has that can here. So whenever you have 2 answers that are kind of the same, it's probably going to be one of those. So we can see it's going to be A or be, it's not going to be could have polluted waterways or has polluted waterways, because it's still happening. It still can happen. So it's not has, it's not could have. And then for that apostrophe S, that makes something possessive. So what of the waterways? It's not that there's something possessive of the waterways, it's just waterways, plural. There's more than one waterway. So this is just going to be no change. See how even though it sounded okay when I read it, there wasn't an obvious mistake, I still have to go and evaluate every single answer choice and see if there's something wrong with it before I eliminate it. Notice too that as we've come along, I am crossing out the letters that I am tossing out. So if I say it can't be C, I'm crossing out C. If I say it can't be B, I need to cross out B so that when I look back at this, let's say I have that extra 5 minutes to go and review questions and double check my answers. I know for question 3, I evaluated all those answer choices and I found reasons to eliminate B, C, and D and pick A. When I go back to check 1, I know I eliminated A, but I picked D because it sounded best to me. I did not use a grammar rule to pick D. I used the meaning of outweigh. So it's a great way to just keep track of what you're picking and why as you go along. Okay, let's look at number 4 here. So yogurt manufacturers, food scientists, and government officials are also working together to develop additional solutions for reusing whey. So once you really study that grammar handout, and by grammar handout, I mean, where's our grammar handout? I'm gonna grab it. The one that won't load on my iPad right now, but the one just titled grammar handout in that email that I sent out for you guys. Once you really study that, it's the biggest one with the most pages, but it doesn't take that long to get through. For a question like number 4 that we're about to look at, you should be able to answer it in under 30 seconds, maybe even under 20 seconds. It should be a super fast question. Once you get better at grammar questions specifically, you'll be able to identify the flaw, what you need to fix before you even look at the answer choices a lot of time, which is great once you get to that point. So for number 4 here, I saw a big uh-oh as I read it. So we have yogurt manufacturers, food scientists, and then a semicolon. We cannot do that. When we use a semicolon, we need a complete sentence on either side of the semicolon or an independent clause if you're familiar with more grammar type language. So we need at least a subject and a verb on each side of the semicolon. So we need a sentence and then a semicolon and then another sentence. I know that yogurt manufacturers, food scientists is not a complete sentence, so it cannot have a semicolon there, so it cannot be answer choice A. We can use a colon sometimes as a semicolon. This only occurs on maybe every other SAT or every 3rd SAT, and the grammar handout does cover this rule. If we have a sentence, so I'm going to say this is sentence 1, and then we have sentence 2 here. And sentence 2 explains sentence 1. Then you know you need to use a colon instead of a semicolon or instead of a comma and a conjunction or a period. So if the second sentence explains the first sentence, you can use a colon the same way you would use a period or a semicolon. To use a semicolon, you need a sentence on either side of it. But this little rule I just showed you here is pretty rare. It's not going to be tested on every single SAT. So we know it can't be A. We know we're not introducing a list or anything here, so it's not going to be B. With that colon, it has to be C or D. So we're going to have yogurt manufacturers, food scientists, and government officials. We just need a comma, and this is just a list. We do not have another comma after that and. So it has to be C for number 4. Let me make sure I don't have any questions here. Okay. Number 5, we're just going to skip. It's a meaning question. It's asking us to move a sentence. Number 6, we're also going to skip, but just because we're skipping them doesn't mean we shouldn't still just read them. So let's see here. Yogurt manufacturers, food scientists, and government officials are also working together to develop additional solutions for reusing whey. Though these conservation methods can be costly and time-consuming, they are well worth the effort. Nutritionists consider Greek yogurt to be a healthy food. It is an excellent source of calcium and protein, serves to be a digestive aid, and it contains few calories in its unsweetened, low, and non-fat forms. So here they're not testing you on that colon right here, but this is actually an example of where the part before the colon is the first sentence or the first independent clause, and the part after the colon there is the second sentence or second independent clause that explains the part that came before. So it actually is a nice little example that we can see right there. But let's see here. It is an excellent source of calcium and protein, serves to be a digestive aid. That's a little weird sounding. I'd say serves to be a digestive aid, and it contains few calories and it's unsweetened. I don't generally like it on the SAT, and you're going to see that in the core concepts handout. I'm going to tell you to avoid long answer choices. So if you're ever down to 2 answer choices in the writing and language section, you're going to pick the answer that is shorter. And we're going to try to avoid pronouns as much as possible, especially it. It doesn't mean that you're never going to pick an answer that contains it or a pronoun. We just try to avoid it for clarity. So throughout the entire writing and language section, we are looking for answers that are clear, concise, and consistent. This is our goal. And you can write this down somewhere. This is our big goal for SAT writing and language. We want an answer that's clear, concise, and consistent. By picking answers that are shorter, that say the same thing using fewer words, we are avoiding redundancy, being repetitive, and we're picking answers that are more concise. By making sure that we use the correct pronoun and tense and so forth, we are improving clarity, which is the ultimate goal. And then answers that are consistent with the rest of the passage. Those are going to be the meaning questions. We have to always be paying attention to the context. But let's see here. We know to be is just does not sound great. Let's evaluate our answer choices. We have as and like. We're never going to pick like if we can use as. Also remember this when you are writing your personal statement or supplemental essays for your college applications. If you use the word like and you try out as in the sentence and as works, always use as instead of like. So it serves as a digestive aid, serves like a digestive aid, as works better there. And then serves for a digestive aid, that does not work. So it's just going to be as for number 7. For number 8, and it contains few calories and it's unsweetened, low, and non-fat forms. Do we need, let's see, it is an excellent source of calcium. So this is our first part, and I'm going to use a new highlighter so you can see this. So is an excellent source of calcium and protein, serves as something, and contains something. We don't want to use that pronoun here. We have a list. And when we have a list, we want to be consistent in the form. So here is all active voice. So we have serves, contains. We don't want to say serves and then containing or will contain or say it contains. We want to match that form and be consistent. So we're just going to say see here contains. So it's not going to be that ing. We're not going to say future tense will contain, and we're not going to use it unless we absolutely have to, and it still makes sense with eliminating the it. Number 9, These questions tend to be really tricky for students. So as you work towards answering all the writing and language questions correctly, if you struggle with these, it's quite normal. So this is going to be a meaning question. So we're going to come back to it, picking that transition. So also because it is more concentrated, Greek yogurt contains slightly more protein per serving, thereby helping people stay satiated. I think this passage is almost done. Yeah. For longer periods of time. These health benefits have prompted Greek yogurt's recent surge in popularity. In fact, Greek yogurt can be found in an increasing number of products such as snack food and frozen desserts. Because consumers reap the nutritional benefits of Greek yogurt and support those who make and sell it, therefore farmers and businesses should continue finding safe and effective methods of producing the food. So satiated there is the correct word. This is something where you're either going to know it or you're not. If you are really, really terrible at vocab and you are in middle school or early high school, it may be beneficial to do something like Wordly Wise. I can think of as a great vocab program. However, if you are later on in high school, it's really not going to be beneficial to get those flashcards. Focus on getting all the other questions correct. But satiated here means actually being full, not being hungry. It's the correct word. And I'll give you the formal definition here for satiated. So satiate is to satisfy your appetite. You could say satisfy your appetite, to be full. And that works. So we're not going to say fulfilled or complacent or sufficient. And even if you don't know the word satiate, you can think about, have you ever heard someone say after a meal, I feel really fulfilled or complacent or sufficient? Probably not. So you can always use elimination, even if you're not familiar with the word. And then here with number 11, this is a case where it's going to be hard to avoid the it because all the answer choices have it. We do have this therefore smack dab in the middle of the sentence. I'm actually going to use my red highlighter because we don't like that. That therefore, and if we had the therefore there, we would need the comma before and after the therefore and a semicolon or something before it. So we do not want that therefore. That is problematic. So we would need that to be a semicolon and that to be a comma in order to have that therefore there. So it can't be A. B, let's check that out. So because consumers reap the nutritional benefits of Greek yogurt and support those who make and sell it, farmers and businesses should continue finding. So that works to just have farmers there. So that works. We do not need that so. If we have an answer that has fewer words, it's more concise and it works, we're going to pick that. So we would pick B over C. And then D, that colon, we do not need the colon there. The comma works. We have an introductory clause, introductory phrase, and then farmers. So B works. So now that we've answered, we can check that we're done with the passage, all the questions. We can go back and see the questions that we skipped. So let's see, we answered 1, 2, 3, we skipped 5. To make this paragraph most logical, sentence 5 should go where? Do not make the very easy but silly mistake of thinking this is sentence 5. Sentence 5 is actually marked at the beginning of the sentence. So that is sentence 5. Since you're not going to have a highlighter on the SAT, I would use big brackets like so to mark off the sentence so you know which sentence you're moving. So if it is improperly introduced into the environment, what happens? So let's think about when are we introducing it into the environment, right? So we go back to the beginning of the sentence, the main environmental problem caused by production of Greek yogurt. So here we have environment. And here we talk about the environmental problem. Production of Greek yogurt is the creation of acid whey as a byproduct. Because it requires up to 4 times more milk to make than conventional yogurt does, Greek yogurt produces larger amounts of acid whey, which is difficult to dispose of. So we have environment and we have improperly disposing of it, right? If we're introducing it into the environment. So it makes sense to move this right before sentence 3 here. So we're going to say move it after sentence 2, before sentence 3. That's where we're going to put it. So after sentence 2, it just makes it easier to come back to these because it requires a little bit more critical thinking to see what components match up. There's always going to be contextual clues that you can use as evidence when you're moving these sentences around. So it's never going to be guesswork of, I think it sounds good here. There should be a reason of this has to go right here. Okay, let's look at 6. The writer is considering deleting the underlined sentence. Should the writer do this? So though these conservation methods can be costly and time consuming, they're well worth the effort. Nutritionists consider Greek yogurt to be a healthy food. So I would say deleting this would be a terrible idea because we do need a transition. The previous paragraph talked about disposing, right? The environmental problems that could be created. And now in this next paragraph, we're talking about how nutritionists think Greek yogurt is great. So we have to transition from disposing this whey runoff, and now Greek yogurt is great for us. So we need the transition. So we know it's not going to be a yes. That should be a no, do not delete. So because it continues the explanation, it's not continuing explanation, right? It's transitioning. So it has to be D, no, because it sets up the argument in the paragraph for the benefits of Greek yogurt. It's a lot easier to come back to these, as I said before. Okay, number 9, also a meaning question. So the way I like to do these is we're actually going to cross out the also that's there and write it next to answer choice A, that no changes the also. And we're going to read before and after and decide how are the 2 sentences related, and then based on that relationship, pick a word. So let's see here. Nutritionists consider Greek yogurt to be a healthy food, and then it has all the reasons why it's healthy. And then in that next sentence, it says, because it is more concentrated, Greek yogurt contains slightly more protein per serving, thereby helping people stay satiated. So it's continuing why it is so healthy. It's just providing more information. So also works. In other words, would be if we were restating the same thing that came before, which we're not doing. Therefore would be if we had a cause and effect. So if we said, let's say Greek yogurt is really healthy for these reasons, therefore nutritionists recommend that you consume it every day, then therefore would work. And for instance would be if you have an example. So here we would just pick A, and I think that wraps up the first passage. So I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes, which is pretty ambitious. But I'm going to give you 5 minutes to get through as much of, let's see if we're going to do the dark snow passage or maybe a different one. Let's have you do, yeah, we'll have you do the, thinking here on the spot. We'll have you do the dark snow, just the next one. So dark snow, and I'm going to give you 5 minutes to get through it as much as you can. If there are questions you don't get to, that's okay. And I'm going to mute myself and stop my video while you answer those questions. So 5 minutes, the dark snow problem, get through as much of it as you can. for you and a little bit rushed. That's okay. The first thing that you want to get really good at with the writing and language section is identifying questions that you're able to easily answer as you go through the passage. So when we read that passage out loud earlier, obviously you're not going to have time to read these passages out loud. You're going to have to skim them and get through them as fast as possible. And when you get to a question that you just don't know, even if it's a grammar question, a question that generally I would like you to answer, as you go through the questions, it's okay to skip and come back to them. We are collecting points when we're taking standardized tests. So it's important to identify what questions do you actually know. Okay, number 12 here. So I'm not going to read through the whole passage again. We're just going to go right to the questions. Which choice most accurately and effectively represents the information in the graph? This is a pretty easy question because we don't even need to know grammar or anything about the writing and language section, other than when they tell you to reference a graph, you should, and make sure you're referencing the correct one if there's more than one graph. So let's see here, which choice most accurately and effectively represents the information in the graph. We're going to have to check these one by one. So to as low as 20 degrees is the original, but we see it gets lower than 20 degrees. It gets to 12 degrees and 19 degrees. So those are both lower than 20. So it's not going to be A. So to 12 degrees Fahrenheit, that's true. To their lowest point on December 13th, we know the lowest point is here where it's 12 degrees, and that's on March 5th. So it can't be C. And then D to 10 degrees Fahrenheit and stay there for months. So let's see, I don't even see 10 degrees Fahrenheit in this graph. And if it stayed there for months, it would be at 10 degrees like that, and then a straight horizontal line. And we don't see that. So D is out. Okay, let's move on to number 13. Which choice most effectively combines the two sentences at the underlined portion? So we are replacing a period with something else. If we have a period that's correctly used, our options are going to be a comma and a conjunction. So an and, a but, and so forth. We could use a semicolon. And remember, we technically could use a colon if this second part explains. So I'm going to say this is one and this is explains one, just for the sake of time and make this fast. Whoops. There we go. Of course, now my grammar handout pulls up. Okay, so we know it's not going to be just a comma. That doesn't work. It could be a comma and it's not just going to be an and by itself. We need that comma and a conjunction. So it has to be B and C. We also know that we don't like long answer choices, and we don't really like pronouns, especially it, but other pronouns are also problematic. So here we have in this thawing. Do we need to say this thawing, or can we just say thawing? We could probably just say thawing. So it's going to be, wait, let's see. It's not going to be C. I should have probably read the sentence to begin with, both of them. I have a feeling I eliminated a right answer here by not reading it. Okay, let's read the sentence. Typically, the ice sheet begins to show evidence of thawing in late summer. This follows several weeks of higher temperatures. Why? Who can tell me in the chat box? I caught this. Why would I not pick C? That's like such thawing. And this can happen from time to time where you're just eliminating everything and you need to backtrack. Why would we not say such thawing? What's the grammar reason for why not say such thawing or this thawing? Who can tell me? So we've just eliminated all the answer choices. We need to go back. And sometimes that will happen as you go through the answer choices. You're going to eliminate everything, and then you need to reevaluate. Maybe we missed something to begin with because we didn't read. Well, I didn't read. Why not thawing? So I don't see the answer here, so I'm going to give it to you. It's redundant to say thawing when we are combining the two sentences. We have thawing here, and then we have thawing again there. That's redundant. We want answers that are concise. Remember that mantra: clear, concise, and consistent. So we know we don't want the thawing. Let's go reevaluate A and D. And this evidence or just following, can we just have a comma there? Would that work? So typically the ice sheet begins to show evidence of thawing in late summer following several weeks of higher temperatures. So that comma actually does work there because we eliminated that independent clause. We eliminated that this follows, right? So because we do not have that subject and verb on both sides, we do not need a comma and. So do you see with B and C, with a comma and, we would need a subject and verb, and then a comma and then a subject and verb, or you could have more than one subject and more than one verb. But here, let me just put this on. Do not disturb. Here we go. So it has to be answer choice A for number 13. We do need that comma and then following, and look how this is the shortest answer. It's the most concise. It's the most clear. Okay, let's go on for number 14. So we're going to cross out that for example, put for example here. I'm at least going to read for this part. So typically the ice sheet begins to show evidence of thawing in late summer. This follows several weeks of higher temperatures. In the summer of 2012, virtually the entire Greenland ice sheet underwent thawing at or near its surface by mid-July, the earliest date on record. So there is a contrast here. Typically it's late summer, but then there was a really early date. So we would not say, for example, we would not say as such, or moreover, we need that contrast there. So it would be B, however. Number 15. The summer of 2012 was the warmest in 170 years, records show, but Jason Box, an associate professor of geology at Ohio State, believes that another factor added to the early thaw, the dark snow problem. Okay, so first off, I immediately notice we do not want that semicolon. Remember, we want a subject and a verb on both sides of the semicolon. So we don't want that semicolon there. We do not want it if we can avoid it. And you'll also see in my core concepts handout, we're going to avoid the word being whenever we can. Being is one of the worst words on the SAT. So let's see if we could just have a colon there. So believes that another factor added to the early thaw, colon, the dark snow problem. We're introducing something so that colon works. So we can easily answer 16 and then go back to 15. As I was reading 15, I saw an associate professor of geology at Ohio State. I need a comma here because this little part describes Jason Box. And it's also non-essential. So non-essential elements, you want a comma before and after the non-essential element. I can check that it's non-essential by just crossing it out. Look what happens when I cross it out. It says, but Jason Box believes that another factor added to the early thaw. It works without that part. So we've confirmed it's non-essential. So we need that comma after Ohio State. So we need that comma. So it's not going to be no change or answer choice D. And then we want that comma right after Box so that this whole part is non-essential. So it's going to be C. Okay, let's go on. Try to knock out a couple more of these and then we'll wrap up. So for number 17, we see of it. So remember it, whenever we can avoid it, we should, because it's not specific. We want clarity here. So what is drifting over Greenland? So let's see here. According to Box, a leading Greenland expert, tundra fires in 2012 from as far away as North America produced great amounts of soot, some of which drifted over Greenland. If I say some soot, that's redundant. We don't want to say soot again because we already have soot there. So we are not going to do that. We're not going to use the it. Let's see what happens if we delete the underlined portion. So produce great amounts of soot. Some drifted over Greenland. Well, what drifted over Greenland? Some is not very specific. So we're not going to delete it. We want to be clear. What are we talking about? That's soot, but we don't have to restate soot. Okay, 18. Drifted over Greenland in giant plumes of smoke and then fell. Do we need fell or falls or will fall? So for tense, we're going to look at the context. It produced, it drifted, and then it fell. So we just want to be consistent there and keep that past tense. So it's just going to be answer choice A. And then let's look at 19, limiting its ability. So this is a case where if it was singular, whatever the it was referring to, singular possessive, you would have to keep the it, even though I don't like it on the SAT. But let's see, what is it limiting? So limiting its ability, what is it referring to here? What is reflecting the sun's rays? So known that soot particles facilitate melting by darkening snow and ice. It's that snow and ice that's reflecting. Snow and ice is plural, and it has to be possessive there. There, this answer choice C is over there when we're talking about a location. So it's not going to be that. And B is singular possessive. So if it was just the snow reflecting the sun's rays, then it would be answer choice B. But since it's a snow and the ice, it has to be D. Number 20, which choice best completes the description of a self-reinforcing cycle? So this is a meaning question. So if you were working through this passage, you would come back to it. For the sake of time today, we're just going to look at it. So self-reinforcing cycle. So if you have a self-reinforcing cycle, whatever it ends with is what it starts with. Well, let's see here. The result of a self-reinforcing cycle as the ice melts. So that's the first step. So we want to end with melting if it starts with melting. So we're not going to end with rising temperatures. We're not going to do that. We want to end with melting because it starts with melting. So it's not going to be no change. It's not going to be raising the surface temperature or begins to cool. We want that melting, so it has to be D. If D wasn't an option, I would say raising the surface temperature would probably be the next best thing. It would be the closest to melting. Number 21, the pattern box observed in 2012 may repeat itself again. Let's see again. Do we need that? The pattern box observed in 2012 may repeat itself again. Doesn't repeat mean that it's happening again? That's redundant. So we don't want again, repeat itself with damage and harmful effects. Damage is also redundant if we're already saying harmful effects. We're not going to say that. And this is long, wordy. And then D itself, possibly with harmful effects, unless there was something that indicated we need a possibly where it's not, we're not going to add it in. So it wouldn't be D. We would just go with B. And then let's see, is 22. Well, yeah, 22 is our last one. To make this paragraph most logical, sentence 4 should be placed where? So we're going to block off sentence 4. Box is currently organizing an expedition to gather this crucial information. Okay, what is this crucial information? I don't know. I need to find it, right? The next step for Box and his team is to travel to Greenland to perform direct sampling of ice in order to determine just how much of the soot is contributing to the melting of the ice. That is what the crucial information is. So we want that after sentence 5, and then it makes sense that we're saying he's organizing an expedition. And then in sentence 6, we talk about tracking the team's progress for that expedition. So we're going to say after sentence 5 there. Let me make sure we answered all the questions, that we didn't skip any. Okay, and that wraps up today's workshop. I am going to send you guys in the chat box just a quick little questionnaire that's completely anonymous, and it helps me plan future workshops and just evaluate what you liked about today's workshop, what you didn't like, and what you'd like to see more of in the future. So I'm going to put it in the chat box here. It's just carlaberry.com/evaluation. And I'll also share on the screen what it looks like. And if you'll just take, I think it takes like 1 or 2 minutes to fill this out. I don't think any of the boxes are a must. So if you don't want to answer something, you can just skip a box, but it just looks like this. You can also just go to carlaberry.com and then go to program evaluation right here to get to this link. And then if you go to the Safety Harbor Public Library link here, you can see some of the other workshops that I have coming up this fall. So tomorrow is the math strategies workshop. And then at the end of the month, we have the reading workshop. And then we have the college applications workshop on October 5th. I think I have on here that the college applications workshop is for seniors. I didn't know if I specify that anywhere in here. I do have some room in the college applications workshop. So if you are in high school, even 9th, 10th, 11th grade, and you're curious about what you're going to be needing to do for your college applications workshop, it's always a good idea to attend that one. And since I have room, I'm going to open it up to other grades too for that workshop, just so that you know kind of what's coming. And you can maybe change some things that you're doing now to make the college application process easier once you get there. And let me see here. So someone asked if we're able to get the recording from today. Yes, you can. If I don't send out a link, you can just email me and I can send it to you. But hopefully I can get a link out. I'm going to just see if there's any questions. I'm going to give you guys a few minutes. If there's a specific question that you want to ask, feel free to put it in the chat box here. And let me see. No questions so far. Somebody asked for question 18, why would it be A versus D? Because of the tense. So earlier in the sentence, we have produced and we have drifted. So those are past tense. So we need fell, which is also past tense. Falls, will fall, and had fallen are not past tense. So it's not going to be B, C, or D. It's going to be A. If for D that had fallen specifically, you would have had produced, had drifted earlier in the sentence. You would just have to match it so that it would be the same. And in this case, there is no other had in that sentence that I can spot right now. So you know it's not going to be D. It has to just be A with the drifted. And I don't see any other questions. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Please fill out that evaluation if you have a minute or two to spare. And I hope to see some of you back at the future workshops that I'm offering later this month and next. Have a great evening, everyone. Bye-bye.